This is a continuation of chapter 27, and we're on section D. It's the 12 links of interdependent co-arising chapter in The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. And I'll just go over the last part of what we just were in section C. Every link conditions every other link. With this understanding, we can abandon the idea of a sequential chain of causation and enter deeply the practice of the 12 links of interdependent co-arising. Although it says in the sutra that consciousness brings about mind-body, and mind-body brings about the 6 ayatanas, and so on, we must understand this as a way of speaking and nothing more. We have to see the 12 links in a broad, open way. And now we'll continue. Consider, for example, craving as the fruit of feeling. Sometimes a feeling does not lead to craving, but to aversion. Sometimes the feeling is not accompanied by ignorance, but by understanding, lucidity, or loving kindness. And the outcome will not be craving or aversion. To say that a feeling brings about a craving is not precise enough. Feeling with attachment and ignorance brings about craving. We must link each of the 12 links with all the other links. This is what the Heart Sutra means when it tells us no interdependent co-arising. The 12 links are empty because each of them would not exist without all the others. Feeling cannot be without craving, grasping, coming to be, birth, old age, and death, ignorance, volitional actions, and so on. In each of the 12 links, we see the presence of the other 11. Feeling that can lead to craving, non-craving, or equanimity. Ignorance is avidya, the lack of light. Vidya is understanding or wisdom. The presence of light means the absence of darkness. The presence of day means the absence of night. The presence of ignorance means the absence of understanding. The Buddha said, when ignorance comes to an end, understanding arises. Ignorance leads to volitional actions, the will to live. When you are angry, you want to do something, but does understanding lead to the will to die? No, it leads to the will to live also. In understanding, there is loving kindness and compassion. And when you are compassionate, loving, and understanding, you want to do something to help alleviate the suffering. Anger, hatred, and ignorance are forms of energy. Understanding and compassion are also forms of energy. On one side, there are actions for grasping things or satisfying our desires. On the other side is the volition to be present in order to help alleviate suffering. This is the intention of Buddha, Bodhisattvas, and all people of goodwill. They have love, understanding, and therefore the willingness to be present amidst the suffering in order to bring relief, comfort, and joy. The expression volitional action or will to live has to be understood in these two ways. One, to live in order to experience pleasure for oneself alone or to oppress others. Or two, to be present in order to help. Social workers do not go into slum areas because they want power or riches. They go because they want to serve, to fulfill their need of loving. That is also a volitional action. When the Buddha looks at a flower, he knows that the flower is his own consciousness. There is nothing wrong in having consciousness. It is only when we water unwholesome seeds, ignorance, hatred, jealousy, anxiety, that consciousness causes suffering to ourselves and others. Consciousness is the base for distinguishing, planning, helping, and doing good work. That kind of consciousness is present in the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas. The Buddha said, "How lovely is the city of Vaishali." He said, "Ananda, don't you think that the rice fields are lovely? Shall we go into town and share the Dharma?" These statements are based on lucid consciousness, consciousness full of understanding, care, and love. We have to water the seeds of our own lucid consciousness. There is ignorance in us, but there is also wisdom. The seed of awakening is also present in each link. In compost, there are flowers, and in flowers, there is compost. If we know how to make compost, it will quickly become flowers. If we know how to look after flowers, they will last longer. Don't think there is only ignorance in the 12 links. There is also the seed of awakened wisdom. If you throw away the 12 links, you will not have the means to arrive at peace and joy. Don't throw away your ignorance, volitional actions, or consciousness. Transform them into understanding and other wonderful attributes. As you can see, there is also a positive side to the 12 links. Although Buddhist teachers since the time of Buddha seem to have overlooked this, we need to find words to describe the interdependent co-arising of positive states of mind and body, and not just of negative states. The Buddha taught that when ignorance ends, there is clear understanding. He didn't say that when ignorance ends, there is nothing. What does clear understanding condition? Clarity. The absence of ignorance gives rise to the desire to act with love and compassion. This is called the great aspiration, Mahapradhana, Mahampradhana, or mindful awakening, bodhicitta, in Mahayana Buddhism. When you practice the Four Noble Truths, you see that you can liberate yourself and other beings, and you stop running away from and destroying yourself. The positive side of volitional actions is the motivating energy called the great aspiration that propels us towards the beautiful and the wholesome, rather than toward the hell realms. Just as volitional actions condition consciousness, the great aspiration conditions wisdom. When our ignorance has been transformed, what we have been calling consciousness becomes wisdom. Consciousness is described in the Vijnanavada schema in terms of 8 consciousnesses, and these are transformed into 4 wisdoms. When the seeds of awakening, love, and compassion in our store consciousness have been developed and matured, our store consciousness, Alaya Vijnana, is transformed and becomes the great mirror wisdom that reflects the reality of the cosmos. All the seeds that can become the great mirror wisdom are already present in our store consciousness. We only have to water them. Great mirror wisdom is the outcome of the vow to save beings as our volitional action. When we invoke the name of Avalokiteshvara, this is the willingness and capacity of being there, listening, responding to suffering, and helping beings. When we invoke the name of Samantabhadra, that is the willingness and capacity of acting mindfully and joyfully to serve others. When we invoke the name of Manjushri, that is the willingness and capacity of looking deeply, understanding, and being the eyes of the world. With this kind of will, guided by clear understanding, Our consciousness becomes an instrument of engagement in the world. The presence of a Buddha is an example of this kind of volitional action, an offering of consciousness of what is going on, the willingness to help, and knowing what to do and how to do it in order to alleviate the suffering in the world. That consciousness manifests in mind-body just as it does for everyone else. But the quality of the Buddha's mind-body is different from ours, and we can see and feel that. We have to learn the ways to use our consciousness as a tool of transformation. Our 6 organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, can contribute toward the arising of great mirror wisdom. We see that the Buddha also has 6 senses that enter into contact with 6 sense objects. But he knows how to guard his senses so that the more internal knots will not be tied. The Buddha uses his 6 senses skillfully and realizes wonderful things. The first 5 consciousnesses become the wisdom of wonderful realization. We can use these 5 consciousnesses to serve others. Mind conscious upon emancipation becomes the wonderful observation wisdom that can see things as they are. When the 6 senses and their objects make contact, this contact gives rise to a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. When a bodhisattva sees a child suffering, she knows how it feels to suffer, but she also has an unpleasant feeling. But because of that suffering, concern and compassion arise in her, and she is determined to act. Bodhisattvas suffer like the rest of us, but in a bodhisattva, feelings do not give rise to craving or aversion. They give rise to concern, the desire and the willingness to stay in the midst of suffering and confusion, and to act. When a bodhisattva sees a beautiful flower, she recognizes that the flower is beautiful, but she also sees the nature of impermanence in the flower. That is why there is no attachment. She has a pleasant feeling, but it does not create an internal formation. Emancipation does not mean that she suppresses all feelings. When she comes into contact with hot water, she knows it is hot. Feelings are normal. In fact, these feelings help her dwell in happiness, not the kind of happiness that is subject to sorrow and anxiety, but the kind of happiness that nourishes. When you practice breathing, smiling, being touched by the air and the water, that kind of happiness does not create suffering in you. It helps you be strong and sane, able to go further on your way towards realization. Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and many others have the capacity of enjoying a pleasant feeling, the kind of feeling that is healing and rejuvenating without becoming attached. The feeling that we have when we see people oppressed or starving can give rise in us to concern, compassion, and the willingness to act with equanimity, not with attachment. So, what we're going to do is end this part, and we'll have one more section to this chapter. And that is the end of this part of the